I pulled into the driveway on a Tuesday, 3 weeks ahead of schedule. The dispatcher had called it a network realignment, which was corporate speak for laying off half the regional routes and reassigning the rest. 18 years driving long haul for Meridian Freight. And they handed me a severance packet and a smile. I drove straight home from the terminal in Columbus without calling first. Didn't see the point. My son Noah knew I was supposed to be gone until the 14th. My sister knew the same. I expected the house to be quiet. It was 2 in the afternoon on a Wednesday. School was in session. I figured I'd unload my bag, maybe sit on the porch with a beer, figure out what came next. What I didn't expect was the front door unlocked, or the mail stuffed so tight in the box it had bent some of the envelopes, or Noah's sneakers missing from the mat by the door. Noah always left his sneakers by the door, every single day since he was 5 years old, when his mother taught him that before she got sick. I'd kept the habit going after she passed. It became one of those small things that felt like her still being around. I told myself it was nothing. My sister had probably taken him somewhere. Maybe he'd outgrown those sneakers anyway. But I walked through the house and everything felt tilted. Noah's room was too clean. Not kid clean, where you shove everything under the bed and call it done. Actually clean. His desk was bare. His model airplane kit, the one we'd been building together on my off weeks, was gone from the windowsill. His backpack wasn't hanging on the hook behind his door. I called my sister. She picked up on the fourth ring, out of breath, like she'd been moving fast. "Marcus," she said, "why are you calling me right now?" "I'm home," I said. "Early. Where's Noah?" A pause that lasted about 2 seconds too long. "He's at the program." I told you about it. I didn't remember her telling me. I did remember a voicemail I'd played at a truck stop in West Virginia. Something about a scholarship and an enrichment program for at-risk youth. Something about a director named Hartwell who ran an academy out in Granville County. I'd been pulling a double shift. I'd meant to call back. "What program?" I said. "Give me the address." "Marcus," she said, "it's a residential thing. You can't just show up. He's 11 years old and he's been there how long?" 3 weeks. 3 weeks. I'd been gone 6, which meant she'd sent him there halfway through my route, which meant she'd made that decision without me. "I want the address," I said. "Now." She gave it to me. I heard something in her voice I couldn't name. Not guilt exactly, more like relief. Like she'd been waiting for someone to ask. The drive out to Granville County took 50 minutes. I took Route 40 east and watched the landscape flatten out past the suburbs, past the strip malls and the chain restaurants, out into farmland that didn't have much to say for itself. The GPS took me off the state road onto a county road, and then onto a private drive marked by a white sign with blue lettering. Hartwell Academy for Youth Development. Below it, smaller, shaping tomorrow's leaders today. The property was big. An old converted farm, maybe 80 acres. Main house turned into an administrative building. Outbuildings converted into dormitories by the look of them. There was a fence around the perimeter. Chain link, not decorative. The gate had a keypad. I parked outside the gate and called the number on the sign. A woman answered and told me visiting hours were Saturdays only. I told her I was a parent and I wanted to see my son. She told me that wasn't how the program worked. I told her I was going to stand at that gate until someone came out. 15 minutes later, a man in khakis and a navy polo shirt walked down the drive. He was maybe 45, trim, with a kind of measured smile that looked practiced in a mirror. He introduced himself as Director Hartwell. He shook my hand like we were meeting at a church social. "Mr. Mile, Webb," he said, "I understand you're concerned." "That's my son in there," I said. "He's doing wonderfully," Director Hartwell said. "Honestly, the transformation we've seen in Noah in just 3 weeks has been remarkable. He was struggling before, wasn't he? With discipline, with focus, with the grief that comes from losing a parent young." I didn't say anything. "That's exactly the kind of young man we're designed to help," he said. "We use structured routine, vocational training, character-building exercises. The research on this model is very strong." "What kind of vocational training?" He smiled again. "Work ethic. A sense of contribution. The boys do farm labor, warehouse work, some light manufacturing. Nothing beyond their capacity. It teaches them that their hands can build something. I want to see him today. That's not possible. We have protocols for a reason, Mr. Webb. Parental disruptions during the adjustment phase can undermine months of progress. Your sister signed a 90-day residential agreement. We're only 3 weeks in. He said it calmly. The way you talk to someone you've already calculated will back down. I didn't back down. I drove back to the county road and pulled over and called my sister again, and this time I didn't let her talk around it. I asked her what exactly she'd signed. It was just a residential education agreement, she said. Hartwell told me it would give Noah structure. After he started driving again, he was failing 2 classes. He kept getting into fights at school. He told me he didn't see the point of anything. She paused. He was grieving, Marcus. You were gone 12 days at a stretch, and he was grieving his mother. And I didn't know what to do with that. Hartwell's program had a scholarship for single-parent households. It was supposed to be like a boarding school. Did you read what you signed? I asked. She went quiet. I drove back to the property. I didn't go to the gate this time. I drove the perimeter on the county road and found a stretch where the fence ran along a shallow drainage ditch. The land beyond it was cleared. I could see figures moving out there, 100 yards from the road. Maybe 8 or 10 of them sped across what looked like a field that had been turned into a staging area for some kind of warehouse work. Stacks of wooden pallets. Long work tables under a corrugated metal roof on posts. Boys, most of them, doing something with their hands. Sorting, stacking. I couldn't tell exactly. I got out of my truck and walked along the ditch line until I could see better. One of them moved the way Noah moved. I'd know it anywhere. Something about the way he held his shoulders, same as his mother. He was wearing a grey t-shirt, same as all of them, and he was carrying something heavy and setting it down on a pallet stack. I didn't think about the fence. I went through the drainage ditch and over it. A man I hadn't seen before came around the edge of the metal roof structure and saw me crossing the field. This is private property, he said. He had a radio clipped to his belt. That's my son, I said. Noah heard my voice. He turned around. He looked thinner. That was the first thing I thought. 11-year-old boys are supposed to look soft around the edges, still carrying some of that childhood roundness. Noah's face was different. His eyes were different too. They went wide when he saw me, and then he did something that broke something open in my chest. He looked around first, at the man with the radio, at the other boys, before he ran to me. Like he needed to check if it was allowed. Dad, he said, you're here. He hugged me, and I held on. And he was shaking a little, just slightly. In that way kids do when they've been holding themselves together for too long, and suddenly they don't have to anymore. I thought you knew, he said against my shoulder. They said you knew about this place. They said you agreed it was best, and that's why you weren't calling more. I call every week, I said. We don't have phones here, he said. Director Hartwell said phones interrupt the formation process. He said you had my letters, but you were busy with work. I hadn't gotten any letters. The man with the radio was on it now, talking fast, and 2 more men came around the building from different directions. I picked Noah up. He was too big for it, really, but I picked him up anyway, and he didn't argue. The other boys had stopped working. They were watching us. One of them, a kid, maybe 13, with a bruise on his forearm that was greenish-yellow like it was a week old, just stared. A smaller one, maybe 8 or 9, took a step toward us before he stopped himself. I started walking. The man with the radio stepped into my path. Sir, you need to stop. You need to go back to the gate and wait for Director Hartwell. What you're doing right now is a violation of a legally binding residential agreement. He said legally binding the way people do when they want you to feel afraid of words. Get Director Hartwell, I said. Tell him I'll be at my truck. Sir, if you remove this child from the premises before the agreement is fulfilled, you could be charged with breach of contract. Your sister has authority as emergency guardian. Emergency guardian, I said. That's correct. I kept walking. Noah had his arms around my neck. Dad, he said quietly. Noah had his arms around my neck. Dad, he said quietly. There's a room in the basement of the main building. The ones who don't follow the rules have to sleep there. It's not like a punishment room. Director Hartwell calls it the reflection suite. But Jalen's been in there 4 days and nobody will tell us when he gets out. I made it back to the fence line. I went through the drainage ditch with Noah still in my arms, and I set him in the passenger seat of my truck and I locked the door. Director Hartwell was already coming down the drive from the main building when I looked up. He had 2 men with him this time, and the smile was gone. Behind me, I heard the gate in the fence swing open. "Mr. Webb," he said, "I need you to take a breath and think clearly about what you're doing. This is an emotional moment, I understand that, but you're about to make a decision that has serious legal consequences for you and for your son's future." He stopped about 10 feet from me, calculating distance. "This boy has made real progress here," he said. "Real, measurable progress. Your sister signed a 90-day agreement because she loves him, and she wanted the best for him. You pulling him out today puts all of that at risk. It sends him a message that commitments don't matter, that when things get hard, you run." I looked at him. I thought about Noah looking around before he ran to me. I thought about letters I never received. I thought about a kid named Jalen in a basement. "Call the police," I said, "right now. If you believe you have legal standing here, call them and we'll let them sort it out." He wasn't expecting that. The smile flicker. His eyes went to the 2 men beside him. "That's not necessary," he said. "Make the call," I said, "or I will." I dialed 911 from the hood of my truck while Director Hartwell stood there calculating whether to run or stay, and deciding on staying because running looked worse. The deputy who arrived was a woman, mid-30s, sharp eyes that took in the scene without giving anything away. She looked at Director Hartwell, then at me, then at Noah, sitting in my truck. "Somebody tell me what's happening here." Hartwell went first. Residential agreement, legal guardian authorization, concerned father not understanding the process. I went second. I talked about the letters Noah wrote that never came, about phones being confiscated, about a boy named Jalen in a basement room, about Noah looking around before he ran to me, making sure it was allowed. The deputy, her name tag said Torres, looked at Noah through the truck window. She knocked on the glass gently and he rolled it down. "Hey," she said, "can you tell me if you're okay?" Noah thought about it for a second. "Not okay," he said, "but better now that my dad's here." She looked at Hartwell. "I'm going to need to see the residential facility." He started talking about protocols, about warrants, about the rights of private educational institutions. Deputy Torres let him finish. "Son," she said, "I got about 200 pounds of probable cause standing in that truck telling me he hasn't heard from his kid in 3 weeks. You want to do this the easy way or the slower way?" They did it the slower way. By the time the second cruiser arrived, Hartwell had stopped cooperating entirely, and his staff were doing the thing guilty people do, which is move toward exits and pretend to be checking their phones. The reflection suite in the basement was real. It was a converted utility room, 9 feet by 7, with a cot, a bucket, and a single LED light on a timer that shut off at 9 p.m. Jalen was 14. He'd been in there for 5 days, not 4. His offense, according to the program loan they found on Hartwell's desk, was refusing to meet the daily pallet quota on a day he said he had a fever. There were 23 children at the facility. Their ages ranged from 9 to 15. The program had been operating for 4 years. I sat with Noah in the back of my truck while the investigation unfolded around us. He ate 2 granola bars from my glove compartment like he hadn't eaten since morning, which it turned out he mostly hadn't. Lunch was a half sandwich and a carton of milk for anyone who met their work quota. Less if you hadn't. He told me about the days. Up at 5:30. Calisthenics until 7. Breakfast. Work until noon. Lunch. Work until 5. Dinner. An hour of what Hartwell called leadership formation, which was him lecturing them about weakness and dependency and how their families had sent them there because they couldn't handle them at home. Lights out at 8:30. He told me about the other boys. About a kid named Connor whose mum had signed him up thinking it was an outdoor education program. About a boy named Darius who'd been there twice as long as anyone else and had stopped trying to remember what home felt like. About Jalen, who had the bruise on his forearm from a fall nobody would explain. "Dad," Noah said at one point, "did my aunt know what it was actually like?" I thought about my sister's voice on the phone, the relief in it when I asked. I thought about how she'd watched Noah grieving and felt helpless, and found someone who handed her a solution on a pamphlet. "I don't think she understood," I said. "That's not the same as it being okay." "But I don't think she knew." Noah was quiet for a minute. "Director Hartwell said that you sent me here because I was too much trouble. That you loved me, but you couldn't manage me, and this was the best thing for both of us." I looked at him. "I have driven 100,000 miles in the last 4 years," I said, "so that you have a house and food and a future. I have missed things I didn't want to miss because I was building something for you. And there is nothing on this earth that would make you too much trouble for me. You understand me?" He nodded. "He used to say Mom chose to leave too," he said quietly, "when people got on his nerves. That she left because she was weak, and she passed that weakness on to us. My son's mother died of pancreatic cancer when Noah was 7 years old. She didn't choose anything. She fought until she couldn't. I didn't trust myself to speak for a minute." Deputy Torres came over around 7 p.m. They'd found the financial records in Hartwell's office. The program charged a fee for scholarship families, a smaller one, but a fee. The boys were producing roughly $12,000 a month in labor and product output for a warehouse supply company in Raleigh that contracted through a shell LLC that existed for the specific purpose of making the arrangement look like curriculum. Hartwell netted the difference after expenses. He'd been doing it for 4 years. The original location, in another county, had closed quietly 2 years prior when a parent had asked the right questions and he'd moved operations east. 23 kids. 4 years. The prior location probably held more. They arrested Hartwell at 8:15. He walked out in handcuffs with the same measured expression he'd had when he shook my hand at the gate. Except this time the smile was gone and something else was there underneath it. Something small and cold that had been waiting a long time to be seen. My sister arrived at the scene around 8:30. She'd driven out when I stopped answering her calls and a deputy met her at the road. I watched her talk to Noah through the truck window. She was crying. Noah wasn't. He let her hold his hand, but he looked out the windshield the whole time. Later, after everyone had given statements and CPS had arrived, and the children who had families present had started going home, and the ones who didn't had been taken somewhere safe, she came to stand beside me. "I thought it was real," she said. "He had testimonials. He had a website. Other parents had left reviews." "I know," I said. "I just didn't know what to do with him, Marcus. He was slipping away from me and I panicked and someone offered a lifeline and I took it." "I know that too," I said. "We didn't say much after that. There wasn't much to say that night. At the hospital they checked Noah for dehydration, vitamin deficiency, soft tissue strain in his hands from repetitive labor. Nothing permanent. The pediatrician used that word twice, nothing permanent. I held on to it. I slept in a chair beside his bed. In the morning he woke up and asked for pancakes, and I found a diner 2 blocks from the hospital that opened at 6, and we ate there together for an hour. Just the 2 of us, and he told me about a book he'd been thinking about. A story idea he had, and I listened to every word. The trial took 8 months. I'd taken a regional dispatch job at a smaller freight company by then. Home every night, trade-off in pay, but not by as much as I'd expected. We moved into a smaller house closer to Noah's school. Just the 2 of us. Hartwell was convicted on 14 counts, including labor trafficking of minors, custodial interference, and fraud. He received 32 years without parole eligibility. 4 of his staff members received sentences between 8 and 20 years. The warehouse supply company in Raleigh was dissolved, and its principals were separately charged. My sister wasn't charged criminally. The DA reviewed what she'd signed and what she'd known and concluded she'd been manipulated rather than complicit. She and Noah rebuilt things slowly, over about a year. He didn't forget, but he also didn't cut her off. That was his choice, and I let him make it. Jalen went home to his grandmother in Asheville. I found out later from one of the caseworkers that he'd spent the first 2 weeks back refusing to go outside. Then one morning he just walked out the front door and sat on the porch steps and didn't say anything, just sat there. His grandmother sat with him. They did that every morning for a while. That's all the update I got, and somehow it was enough. Connor, the boy whose mom thought it was an outdoor education program, went back to his family in Virginia. I don't know what happened with Darius. The caseworker wouldn't say. I thought about him more than I probably should have. Noah didn't want therapy at first. Said he was fine, said he just wanted normal. I let him have normal for a month, and then one of his teachers called me because he'd had a panic attack during a fire drill. Just dropped to the floor in the hallway and couldn't breathe. After that, he agreed to talk to someone. His therapist was a man named Dr. Okafor, maybe 50, with a slow way of speaking that Noah said made him feel like there was no rush. They met every week for the first year, every other week after that. I never asked what they talked about. I just drove him there, and drove him home and bought him food after, because apparently the sessions made him hungry. The thing Noah struggled with longest wasn't the work or the basement room or even Hartwell's voice in his head. It was the letters. He'd written me 12 letters over 3 weeks. He'd dropped them in the mailbox they were given specifically for that purpose, which turned out to be a box that went directly to Hartwell's desk. He'd written me 12 letters and I'd never gotten any of them. That was the part that sat in him the hardest. We talked about it one evening, maybe 6 months after he came home. He was sitting at the kitchen table working on a model, a new one we'd started together, and he said without looking up, "Do you think he even read them?" "I don't know," I said. He nodded. "I hope he didn't," he said. They were kind of private. I sat down across from him, and we worked on the model together for a while without saying anything. Then he said, "I wrote about Mum in them, about how I thought maybe she could see what was happening, and she was trying to get a message to you somehow to make you come home early. Isn't that dumb?" "It's not dumb," I said. "I got laid off and sent home," I said. 3 weeks earlier than scheduled. I don't know what that means, but I know I came home, and I found you. Whatever got me there, I'll take it." He looked up from the model. "Okay," he said. That was all. He went back to the model. I went back to the model. But something in the room had shifted a little, like a window had been opened. 2 years after the trial, there was a community event at the rec center in our town. One of the non-profits that works with trafficking survivors had organized it, a gathering for families affected by youth program fraud in the region. There were families from 4 counties, some people from Hartwell's facility, some from others like it that had been shut down over the years. Noah didn't want to go at first. Said it would feel like living it again. I told him he didn't have to go, but I told him what it meant to me that other families might hear his story and recognize something they'd been scared to name. He thought about it for 2 days. Then he said, "Okay, but I'm not doing a speech. I'll just be there." He was there. He sat with Connor, who'd driven up from Virginia with his mother. They were the same age now, 12. And they sat together at a corner table and talked for 2 hours. And I have no idea what they said, and I didn't try to find out. I gave a short talk about warning signs. I kept it practical. Things you should ask before you sign anything. Can I visit unannounced? Do the children have unrestricted access to phones? Who reviews outgoing mail? What are the specific details of the vocational curriculum? What are the consequences for rule violations and who administers them? I'd learned those questions the hard way. I wanted other parents to have them for free. A woman came up to me after and said her nephew was currently in a program in another state, and 3 things I'd described were things she'd noticed, but hadn't known how to name. She left with the name of a lawyer and the number for the National Human Trafficking Hotline. I drove home with Noah that evening and he fell asleep in the passenger seat before we hit the highway. The way he used to when he was small and we'd drive back late from visiting his grandparents. I kept the radio off. A year later, he's doing better in ways that are hard to quantify. His grades came back. He has 2 actual friends he talks to outside of school. He still sees Dr. Okafor twice a month. He built a model of the International Space Station that took 11 weeks and is now approximately too large for his room. The letters he wrote to me, the 12 that Hartwell kept, were entered into evidence at trial and then returned to me afterward. I asked Noah if he wanted them. He said no. He knew what they said. He said maybe burn them, maybe don't, up to you. They're in a box in my closet. I haven't burned them. I've read each one twice and I won't read them again. The last one ended with, I know you're going to come, Dad. You always come. I just hope it's soon. I have thought about that line more times than I can count. I think about all the fathers and mothers who never got the early route home, who never had a dispatcher hand them a severance packet at the right moment. All the kids who wrote those letters and waited. I didn't do anything exceptional that day. I drove home because I had nowhere else to go. I went to the gate because I needed to see my son. I stayed because there was no version of me that walked away. The system didn't save Noah. A coincidence of timing and a deputy who was willing to look did. That's a thin margin. That shouldn't be the margin. When I give talks now, I end the same way every time. I tell parents, if something feels wrong, it probably is. Nobody legitimate tries to cut you off from your child. Nobody who is actually helping your kid needs you to stay away. The isolation is the mechanism. The paperwork is the mechanism. The language of expertise and correction and what's best for your son is the mechanism. Your instincts are not an obstacle to your child's well-being. They are the first line of defense. Trust them. Noah is in the kitchen right now. I can hear him making a mess of some kind, something involving the microwave, and what sounds like excessive ambition for a Tuesday night. He's going to call me in a minute to help him figure out whatever he's gotten into. I'm going to go help him. That's everything. That's the whole story, or the part of it that matters. The rest is just the ordinary life we're building back, one ordinary day at a time, and I will take every single one. I've thought a lot about the word deserve since all of this happened. People use it loosely. He deserved what he got. She deserved better. As if the universe runs a ledger and eventually balances the books. I don't know if that's true. What I do know is that the things we choose, consistently, over time, tend to produce outcomes that match them. Not always, not on a clean schedule, but often enough that it's worth paying attention to. Hartwell made choices for years, deliberate, calculated choices to exploit the gap between what desperate families needed and what he was actually providing. He counted on Shane keeping parents quiet, on paperwork keeping them confused, on distance keeping them away. And it worked, until it didn't. The mechanism he built required isolation to function. The moment Noah looked up and saw me walking across that field toward him, the mechanism broke. Not because of anything dramatic, because I came home and I went looking. That's the whole thing. That's the entire difference. I made choices too, ones I've had to sit with. 12 days at a stretch on the road. Missed school events. I told myself I'd make up for later. A voicemail I meant to return and didn't. I'm not the villain of this story, but I'm also not entirely clean. I was building a life for Noah while being absent from it, and I told myself that was the trade-off a good father made. Maybe it was. Maybe I had no better option. But I also know that the gap my absence created was the exact gap Hartwell stepped into. That's not guilt. That's just cause and effect. And I think it's important to name it honestly rather than let myself off too easy. What I keep coming back to is Noah's 12 letters. He wrote them every few days, dropped them in a box that went straight to a man who used them to understand what Noah missed and what he feared, so he could use those things as leverage. That's a particular kind of evil, the kind that weaponizes love. And it worked on Noah because Noah is a good kid with real feelings, who genuinely believed that if he wrote clearly enough and honestly enough, the truth would get through. He wasn't wrong about that. He was just wrong about the channel. The truth did get through. It got through because he didn't stop believing I would come. That's not naivety. That's a kind of intelligence. The kind that knows the difference between a person who has let you down and a person who has abandoned you. Noah knew the difference even at 11, even after weeks of being told otherwise. That took something. I don't have a clean word for it. Steadiness, maybe. The kind that doesn't require certainty, just the decision to keep believing until you have a reason not to. I try to carry that into how I move through the world now. When something feels wrong, I say so instead of waiting for a better moment. When I'm uncertain about what my son needs, I ask him instead of guessing. When someone offers me ease in exchange for less scrutiny, I slow down. None of that is complicated. All of it is harder than it sounds. Noah is fine. More than fine. He's building a model right now that is taking over the kitchen table, and I've been asked not to touch any of the pieces. He earned that. He earned the right to fill up all the space he needs with something that's entirely his. I think that's what we owe the people we love. Not protection from every hard thing. Just the certainty that we will come when it counts. That we won't let the paperwork or the distance or the smooth-talking man at the gate convince us that staying away is somehow better for them. It isn't. It never is. Show up. Keep showing up. That's the whole lesson. That's all of it.